All right, let's talk about some common questions to building and maintaining a healthy, cohesive, and highly functional leadership team. So, love this book, The Advantage. It is one of the best books on organizational team health. Patrick Lencioni has so many good resources. Most of his books are actually focused on a business fable and they tell a great story, and then there's a bunch of great principles. This book is just pure gold. It's all principles. So, if you have ever read the book called The Four Obsessions of an Extraordinary Executive, it basically takes this and does a deep dive in this book with the principles, applying a lot of his different books and principles. So, anyways, big fan of The Advantage. A leadership team, according to Lencioni, is defined as a small group of people who are collectively responsible for achieving a common objective for their organization. So think for the greater good. It pairs so nicely with what we're trying to do at EOS. So a leadership team is not just a collection of high level executives, right? Just because you're a high level executive doesn't mean you are necessarily a leader and manager of the major functions of the organization, right? Ultimately, you guys are a team that is operating as a unified force. We call it in EOS one vision, one voice, one team. And you're responsible for making key decisions, the highest, most important decisions within the organization. And so a leadership team, they typically are going to drive the major functions of the organization: sales and marketing, the operations, and the finance. Okay, another great quote here: a leadership team is both healthy and smart. If you are on your EOS journey with your EOS implementer, you will have heard this again and again: healthy and smart. So smart is referring to like technology, it's the strategy piece, the marketing, the finance, those types of things. Great. Smart is where all the data goes, and that's where most organizations spend all this time trying to get smarter, and that's good. Being healthy is actually a higher competitive advantage. Hence the book, the title, The Advantage, right? So what this does is when you're a team that's healthy, you can get smarter. If you're a team that's smart, you may not be able to actually get healthy, right? And so a healthy team exhibits minimal confusion, minimal politics, high morale. They have high productivity, low turnover. So I love the differences between those two. Let's look at some more common questions. So who can be on the leadership team and how big is the leadership team? So ultimately, you're trying to answer the question, how big can this leadership team be? And the reality is that this team, you want this team big enough to be able to be highly functional, but small enough so that you can adapt and adjust, right? So think about it like this: the leadership team consists of those leaders who are ultimately accountable for the major functions, not every function, but the major functions that are driving the organization. So let's think about them: sales and marketing, operations, finance. Those are the three major functions. And then you also have the visionary and integrated function. So sometimes sales gets split into sales and marketing, but ultimately, the note here is that it's the accountability chart. Whoever is at the top level of the accountability chart, that is who we are considering the leadership team. And so a common mistake is that people try to invite everybody, include everybody, 8, 9, 10 people on the accountability chart at the top level. And that's just not true. That's just not who is truly running the organization. There may be a second level of tier leadership. Doesn't mean they're not a leader. It just means they're not on the top level of the accountability chart, truly driving and leading that major function of the organization. So when the accountability chart is made, it's looking forward 6 to 12 months in the future. What does this company, this organization need to look like? No egos, no people, structure first, people second. Again, top level of the accountability chart. And in summary, it's typically about 5 to 6 people. Okay. So when you're thinking about how many people should it be, Lencioni, he kind of gives a recommendation of 3 to 7. He says if it's beyond 8, it creates problems, right? And we'll talk about those problems here in a second. But love this quote. This is from another one of his books, The Five Dysfunctions of a Team. So again, all his books are kind of interrelated, but success is embracing common sense with uncommon levels of discipline and persistence. So you just can't get that with a big leadership team. You can't get disciplined, relentless focus on results in a team that's highly engaged. Okay. The reason this matters so much is because the leadership team is coming together, first of all, every 90 days, doing your quarterly pulsing. And so you're going to spend 8 hours, 7 hours plus or minus an hour, 8 hours. Do you really want 9 to 10 people? That's a lot of money and time and energy. Just bring your top 5 or 6 most important leaders for the leadership team, and that's who you're focused on. Also, the 2-day annual, you're doing that at every year, and you're spending 2 full days. And then every week you're doing 90 minutes of a level 10 meeting. That is the most important meeting of the entire week. It is the game day of your organization. So what is the cost? I really want you to take this into consideration. You're thinking about bringing more people to one of the EOS sessions, or potentially you have more than about 7 people. Okay, 3 to 7 is Lencioni's recommendation. More than 7, what's the cost? Here's what the cost is. Slower decision making. You got to hear from everybody. Everybody has a perspective, and you're ultimately trying to, listen and understand from different people's perspectives. There's misalignment between departments, right? And so higher complexity is just not simple. It's not simple. It's not the best and simplest structure that you can come up with. You have a slower ability to adapt and adjust. You just can't pivot as well with a big team. Think about a big ship versus like a jet ski, right? It's just you're slower to be able to pivot, to adapt and adjust. And then there's more back channel politics and confusion. Ultimately, you're trying to eliminate confusion. So the most important thing though, lower execution. It's slower and it's lower, and so you're not getting that feeling of traction. There's a great quote within the book, The Advantage, and it's basically he goes into addressing this exact issue. And he talks about the difference between inquiry and advocacy. And he got this from a Harvard professor. But basically, when you have a large group of people, everyone is advocating for them. That means that they are stating their opinion. They want their voice to be heard. They're more likely going to speak up, but only to state their opinion. Inquiry actually is where you get the true problem solving ability. You're asking questions to understand. You're seeking to identify what the root issue is, right? You're IDSing essentially, IDS. And so inquiry happens more likely when there's a smaller team because there's a space. There's a common space in place for all the leaders of the organization to have a voice for advocacy. And then inquiry is me asking questions to hear and understand your advocacy. And so there's just not that space. You run out of time when you have too many people. Everyone is going to not share as much. They're going to be holding back more because they know that their one opportunity to speak is going to be limited. So they're going to be more likely to just do advocacy versus inquiry, asking questions, being really curious, being creative. So that's a really important distinction here. Okay, often this is very, very common. The leadership team, the executives, they want to be inclusive. They want to bring everybody. We love everybody. Everybody's a leader, and that's true. And you do love everybody, but ultimately, it's the correct way of saying, we want input from as many people as possible. And that is true, but do you really want that on the most important decisions of the entire organization? Or do you really just want that from the major functions, the major key stakeholders, and they can relay it down in the cascading messages in their level 10 department meetings, right? So you're trying to say ultimately decision making needs to be made at the leadership team level. This is a leadership team decision, and then there may be a sales decision that needs to get pushed down to the lower level. So really important idea to understand. Okay, last common question. What are some pitfalls? So if you are going to choose to have more than 7, here's some things you're just going to have to embrace. You're probably going to run into this. Complexity slows down everything. So you have more voices in the room, which means there's going to be longer discussion. After you get about 7 people, I would add 30 minutes minimum to each uh, quarterly pulsing and 2-day annual session. Every one of your full day EOS sessions, you're probably going to need an additional 30 minutes for each person. And so that just means you're going to have more time because you need to hear from everybody. So that what that does is slow down your decision making. It slows down and it makes it a little bit more inefficient and ineffective. Now, again, doesn't mean it can't be done. You just have to understand these are the pitfalls, right? Your communication is ultimately going to suffer. Again, we kind of talked about that with advocacy versus inquiry, right? And the ultimate idea here is people are stating their viewpoints instead of really listening and drawing out the why, going to the root issue. So it's really difficult to get to the root issue. It's slower. And then this is a big one. The meetings sometimes can become political, not productive. So when you think about the complexity model, you add two people to organization, you increase the complexity. You add three people, it really makes it more complex. The more people you add, the more complex because there's different channels of communication. And so that's going to increase the risk and the opportunity for politicking, right? Repeating yourself over and over again, trying to say the same thing over and over again. And it's just not productive. And so at the end of the day, there's a lot of paralysis of analysis. There's nothing dogmatic about size. It's not like, oh, you're going to be a failure. Your organization's not going to work if you have 8-person leadership team. It's just a practical reality, right? So I love how Lencioni is so practical. Having too many people on your team can cause a variety of logistical challenges, and it really has to do with the communication. Do you want effective communication? Create a smaller, more cohesive leadership team. So I hope that this video and that this presentation kind of helps you understand some of the differences and the common pitfalls of what a leadership team is, who is on the leadership team, and how many people should be on the leadership team, right? Size does matter. So if you want to be more efficient and more effective, I would encourage you to keep it between 3 and 7. May God bless. Have a great rest of your day.